So, my guest on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast is Jeff Borschowa. Now, Jeff is a podcaster. He is a strategist and thinker who provides strategy and clarity for visionaries, for marketers, and for business owners who hate fluff. And he is the ideal guest to talk about this topic, which is the balance between strategy, tactics, sales, and of course, now the new kid on the block, AI. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Well, Neil, I'm so excited to be on the show. Thank you for being on my show. And today we're going to have some fun.
We are indeed. And I guess this is kind of like an extension of our earlier conversations. And it feels like we've had quite a few now. We never stop, do we? Once we get going and rolling on a topic, it just feels there's just so much to unpick and explore. And I think when we kind of decided that this was going to be an angle we were going to go down for this particular conversation, it was just, I think we both smiled at the kind of the thought of trying to unpick something which is, I guess, an age-old challenge. I mean, strategy versus tactics first, and then kind of strategy and tactics versus sales, and then kind of sales versus tactics and sales strategically, and then we overlay that with AI, and everybody just kind of runs for the hills. I mean, are we trying to pick off too much here?
Well, I think the good news is that with AI, we can tackle all of this intelligently. The bad news is if we don't understand the first pieces, using AI is dangerous. But if we understand the first pieces, AI makes life easier. So I honestly see it, and I actually exist in a world, my belief system is that the old divide between marketing, sales, onboarding, and customer service, I want to throw away those boundaries and make it all one seamless thing. And I think with AI, we are on the cusp of the ability to do that. Now, to spark our conversation, I'm going to share one of my favorite quotes attributed to Sun Tzu. Now, for the record, I've not been able to find the actual quote in The Art of War, but it might be in a different version other than what I've seen. But it sounds like him, so I'm going to credit him. And the quote is, strategy without tactics is the slowest path to victory, and tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. And that's what I'm seeing right now. There's so much marketing tactics, and it's like, just stop for a beat and ask yourself, does this actually serve my goals? Is this getting me closer to what I want? And I'm sorry, but usually the answer is a resounding no.
I wonder where this kind of comes from, because I totally hear where you're coming from with that, because it's almost like, have we got too fast for ourselves? I mean, it's almost like we're overtaking ourselves here, isn't it? Because I can remember, I'm old enough to remember when a strategy could be like a 10-year plan. It then kind of migrated down to about a 5-year plan. A few years ago, it was then a 3-year plan. That was your strategy. Today, we're not even using it as a word. I mean, okay, some people are saying, Neil, you're wrong. We absolutely are. But I would challenge it and say we're just glorifying tactics, because there's so much of a demand for immediate return, that kind of instantaneous hit and ROI. It's almost like, well, we haven't got time for strategy. Is that kind of what you're saying? I'm paraphrasing there.
Absolutely. And I'm going to point the finger squarely at social media. Now, I'm not going to name names because I don't want lawyers coming after me. But in the early days of internet marketing, a lot of social media platforms taught young people, here's how you can use our platform to make money selling our ads. And I'm being a little bit cynical here, but there was nothing in it about how to help your client succeed with our ads. It was all about, here's how we get more ad revenue and you make money being the middleman. And I kind of see that as the old days, the carnivals where they would send kids out to pick people's pockets. So sorry, social media, but I blame you thoroughly for this. But the reality was we stopped talking strategy. And unfortunately, people think that, next week is a strategy. No, that's tactics. If you're short term, it's always tactics. But definitely since social media, we've gone more and more to the tactic of the day. And there's an interesting trend with the advance of generative AI. The timelines are collapsing even further. Like, people want instant gratification, but actually there's a scientific premise behind all of this that is also causing the problem. And you'll love this as an educator. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect basically says that an amateur at something overestimates their skill set because they don't know what they don't know. Now, the inverse of the Dunning-Kruger is that an expert will always underestimate their skill set because they know what they don't know. And that's the problem right now. And this is what I'm seeing amplified with tools like ChatGPT. Young people who have zero background in business, ChatGPT is telling them, oh my God, you're brilliant, you should run with this. And there's nobody in the room going, we have a strategy, we need to stick to it. And I think that's honestly, I see it as the biggest scam of this year, is all these young people loudly proclaiming I'm an expert at marketing without any experience in business, in marketing. Literally anybody can hang out a shingle now and say I'm a marketer. And unfortunately, the people who pay the price for that are the business owners who waste their time and energy. And, you know, some of these young marketers, they get lucky by accident. But I'm seeing this disturbing trend where we're not focusing on who we serve. So when you bring in a wave of quote unquote leads, I call them suspects actually, then the business has to spend more money on their marketing or on their sales effort to filter through and try and find the client in the midst of all the noise. So I'm seeing a lot of frustrated entrepreneurs because they quote unquote hired a marketing expert, and said expert doesn't know the difference between a random person that you pulled out of the internet versus a genuine prospect. And again, that's strategic versus tactical.
It is, isn't it? And do you think there's almost a missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle here, which is that kind of original definition of strategy? I mean, I just use the analogy of the timeline coming in, but I've always in my head, I guess, and I'd be really interested in your thought on this one, Jeff, is I've often kind of thought of it as being a strategy is something that I can't see because it's just over the horizon, but I know my tactics are kind of directing me towards it. So that kind of strategy is always just that little bit out of reach. But if I can see stuff, that's tactical. And it kind of, it almost gives me a sense of kind of, well-being and kind of like a nice warm feeling inside, knowing that there's this bigger thing that I'm aiming for. So it's not a vision, it's not a mission or anything like that. It's a lot more closer to hand, but it's kind of almost where I'm going to arrive at some point in the future if my tactics are right. But without that kind of steering of a strategy, I could be pointing in completely the wrong direction.
Yeah. And honestly, I have 4 layers that I look at as a business owner. The very top layer is the vision. And I call that sort of the moonshot. You know, you're looking at out to space and you're going, I want to be there. I don't know where there is, but out there. And then I think there's the more practical strategy, which is sort of at the 10 to 30,000 foot view. So vision to me is 10 years and beyond. Pure strategy is what I would call 3 to 10 years. And that's, again, it's on the horizon. I can see, it's like a rainbow. I can see it, but I sure can't get to it. And then I have more of I call it tactical strategy. And that's the next 90 to 365 days. That's where we actually take our goals and we give them deadlines. And then the very bottom is the tactics. And I look at tactics as a accumulation of weekly things that stack up to reach my 90-day strategic goal. And if the things I do every day don't stack up to hit my 90-day goal, I'm just burning energy. And it's kind of like saying, I'm going to go on a vacation. I'm going to go to the airport and I don't care where I go. I'm just going to get on an airplane. Well, I don't know if I've packed the right things. I don't know, am I going to a hot climate, cold climate? If I don't know my destination, very few people would bother going to the airport. unless it was with a trusted guide. But I see a lot of businesses showing up at the airport and it's like, hey, where are you going? I don't know. It's like, well, then how do you know when you've got there if it's the right fit? I personally hate cold. So if you put me on a plane to the Antarctica, I'm going to be cranky. But send me to the beach, I'm a happy camper. So I think that's what's missing, is just pausing for a minute, because if you look at flights, the average airplane's off course 95% of the time. But because they know their destination and they know where they originated, they keep course correcting to get to that point. I believe every business should also be able to do that. Knowing where you want to be is going to determine the tactics even that you use.
Yeah, that course correction's a really nice kind of filter there, isn't it? Because then you can filter in the yes, no decisions of, oh, there's an opportunity over there, left field, right field, wherever. You can then decide, look, if we're going to course correct, there's this thing coming in from the side, we can say yes to it, but it is going to then maybe take us a little bit further out, because the angle then we need to kind of continue forward at is a little bit too broad, and we're going to need to then come back in the future. So we're going to weigh that up. It possibly is a little bit of a stretch, whereas certain little things might come in. It's like, oh, that's going to accelerate us in the right direction. It gives you a purpose and a point, doesn't it? And as you say, then when you've got the AIs then coming in to scale and accelerate everything, to be accelerating and scaling the wrong stuff is a really bad move, but this is going to be the right way of doing it. So any kind of approach, any industry feels it would fit this kind of framework, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And one thing I want to stress is, pre-AI with social media, you could get off course and you'd be a little off course. But with AI now, you can go off course a lot. And so I think that's where I recommend people come back to their core principles, because when you know what success looks like, you know what to say no to. And I'm going to share something that really disturbs me. I've talked to hundreds of marketers, and the vast majority, you accepted, the vast majority can't tell me with absolute certainty who their avatar is. Who do they serve? And I'm like, that's literally the minimum required. If you don't know who you serve, how do you do anything? And I'm not kidding. I actually had one marketer, we were having a conversation about the avatar, and they said, leave me alone, I'm busy. I got to get working on my marketing message. And I'm like, how do you write a marketing message without the avatar? And they couldn't answer, but they knew that their tactics were important and pressing. And I'm like, I promise you, without the avatar, nothing else matters. If you don't know your target, how can you start throwing things out there and hope you hit something?
So do you think this has happened through a variety, or this almost concoction of, sort of bad practice? When you talked a little bit earlier about social media and the amount of influence that has had in terms of mindset and things, if a definition of success is this kind of almost fake overnight kind of wondrous, oh, look at how many zeros I have after my sales, and I've done this and I've done that, that becomes then the new kind of norm, doesn't it? And so is there a feeling, do you think, of desperation in business? Is that if I don't crack it overnight, I'm a failure. If I can't actually hit these numbers of followers, I'm not succeeding. Therefore, I'm going to just forget strategy. And in fact, actually, I'm even going to forget tactics, and I'm just going to focus on selling or sales for sales sake, and actually nothing else really matters. So there's a real desperation that feels, as I talk to that, I kind of feel my heart rate increasing in a not good way, and sort of feeling this is not going to end well.
Well, honestly, the good news is there's an answer and a fix. So I look at the world, there's two types of people, generally speaking: those who have an abundance mindset and those who have a scarcity mindset. And I'm going to bring it back to social media. And as a marketer, I think you'll see this. A lot of social media overemphasizes the importance of demographics. And so if you look at, again, back in the days, I remember seeing panels where I could pick my avatar, so to speak, and literally early days of Facebook, there was a handful of things. It was where they located, what is their gender, what is their rough age range, what is their income range. That is not targeting, in my opinion. And when you're doing that and you reduce your end result to the wrong metric, and we'll get into vanity metrics, but a lot of that was all about how many likes do you have, how many reshares, how many posts, whatever do you have. We forgot the point of those ads, which was to generate cash for the business. And to be blunt, I don't think marketing general, when you look at all of this social media stuff, they want you to look at the shiny object metrics, not the money going out of your bank account. And I had one client that spent $30,000 on some world-class expert on Facebook ads. They burnt through that $30,000 very quickly. And at the end, they said, well, at least we proved that your audience is not on Facebook. And I'm like, I told you that before you started, but again, but I think that's the problem, is when you use tactics first, you actually create a scarcity mindset, because you're always, it's always money going out and you're hoping it's money coming back in. Whereas when I look at things, I start with how do I get the money in first, and then I double down. And I think that's the challenge, is we've lost sight of the metrics that matter. I've worked with hundreds and if not thousands of small businesses. Nobody has yet to figure out how to convert likes into feeding their children. I tried to feed my kids likes once, and they said, no, there's nothing on the plate, Dad. I'm like, no, there's lots of likes. You're good. But the reality is, cash flow is the only metric that matters in marketing and sales. And if you're not monitoring that, I would argue you can't tell me with any confidence whether or not you're doing the right things.
So who's responsible for that then, Jeff? Because I kind of get that in different organizations, there's a different sort of hierarchy. So in some way, it's very kind of sort of sales driven. You could argue, well, sales are going to be driving that because they're going to be looking at the profitability of what they're selling. They're going to be pushing the more profitable products, and it's kind of their marketing as a support role. If you're in marketing and it's kind of a market or marketing led organization, sales there are doing the closures, but marketing is kind of setting up that sort of brand environment to enable sales to work their magic.
Yeah.
Somewhere the responsibility has to be who is owning, as you say, that cash flow, because it's very easy for a marketer. I found the easiest times in my marketing career have been when I've had big budgets to spend, because there's no pressure, because you just spend the money and you've done your job. When there's no budget, literally zero budget, you've got to be really smart. And then the ROI gets really interesting. So is it marketers' responsibility to kind of own this? Because I don't see many examples where they actually own the proper full ROI for the business.
Well, I'm going to be controversial. I firmly believe that when I look in the mirror, I'm looking at the guy whose job it is to make sure everything's going well in my business. So first and foremost, I believe that the leadership, whether it's the owner, whether it's the management, they have the first priority. And I think this is the part that it trickles down. If leadership doesn't have a clear strategy, marketing and sales don't have a hope. Now, the next thing, I'm going to put the blame squarely on the rift between marketing and sales, and quite frankly, between onboarding and customer service. A lot of businesses silo that. And so marketing is going to do what marketing needs to do to earn their budgets, their bonuses, basically keep their jobs. If they're given the wrong metrics, they can game that system. They can spend a lot of money and get all kinds of likes and follows. And, we're building brand. I hate that phrase, especially for small business. Sales, they can say, well, we're getting conversion rates, but, they're blaming the quality of leads from marketing. And, of course, by the time you get down to daily customer support, the gold in a business, and I think give people shovels and let them know where to dig. Your customer support is not a cost center. That to me is the golden opportunity to go back to all of the other departments and say, okay, here's the things we can fix. But most of the time it goes from marketing to sales to onboarding to operations. Nobody looks at the whole experience and says, where are we causing unnecessary friction? And spoiler alert, it almost always starts with the metrics that each department has. And then it comes down to, are they following strategy or just doing tactics? And if they have the tactics, do they serve the strategy or work against it? And again, I've seen this in so many organizations. I worked in a multi-billion-dollar company. The head of marketing and the head of sales actually got into a shoving match in the hallway because they just come from a meeting where the CEO chewed them out, and they were fighting over whose fault it was. And I'm like, it was both of your faults. You're both, and again, they both got their bonuses that quarter. But what I found funny was that a lot of the actual salesmen on the line didn't get their bonuses because they didn't make their quota, but the metrics rewarded the leadership for activities that kept those guys busy, but not necessarily closing deals. And so it all rippled down from the top. But really, truly, if you don't have strategy, how do you know you're successful? By doing the tactics.
It's a fundamental question, and I think people should really almost just stop and pause there. So if you're watching this, press the pause button and actually think about, okay, so how does this apply to you? Try and translate what Jeff is explaining there and say, are you seeing it? Are you feeling it? Is this you? Or are you seeing others doing it? Maybe it's your boss, or maybe it's a colleague or somebody. Are you actually experiencing this? Because my bet is you will be. There'll be something, anything in more than a solopreneur kind of business where you have, interactions between humans. You will be seeing this dynamic because it seems to play out pretty much everywhere, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think that the real symptom, and, I can get really, really philosophical about strategy versus tactics. But symptom, the way life is, if you're running flat out, you're doing everything possible, you're exhausted, you're working 24/7, and you're not seeing your bank account reflect the results. I don't need a diagnostic to tell you that you're too in the tactics. And I'm not kidding, Neil. I actually had one entrepreneur who looked at me. I said, let's spend 30 minutes on Zoom. We'll dig into your business. We'll find the strategy that's missing. And he laughed at me and he said, I don't have 30 minutes and I'm too busy to sit down with you. And I said, that's should be your canary in the coal mine moment where you go, holy crap, this business runs me, not the other way around.
It's shocking, isn't it? It really is. And yet we all know, and I'm guessing there'll be a lot of people listening to this thinking, he's talking about me. That is actually, that is actually me. So with the kind of, obviously with AI, I mean, I think a lot of people are sort of thinking AI is, either coming for their job or, they're going to be able to use it for the next incredible social media piece of content, etc. But there is this opportunity, isn't there? I would say, and I'm really interested in your take on this one, Jeff, because, you're very close to this stuff. There's an opportunity in my mind that you can create almost this board or team of non-exec directors within your AI account, so ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever you're using, and actually get it to critique where you're at right now. And that's a real kind of opening the eyes to an objective kind of sense of, this is the state of my business. I don't have a strategy. In fact, I've got no vision or purpose. I'm selling stuff. The tactics is kind of okay, but I don't really know which bits are working, which bits aren't. I'm kind of doing the numbers, but I think I'm missing out on a trick. And then this kind of board of directors within your AI machine or tool can actually critique maybe the what and the why. Because if we're saying that most businesses are failing at this, then there's a huge amount of data on the internet that can actually be assimilated by the AI to feed back to you how you can improve it. That's what I would say is going to be a huge power, maybe for next year for AI. Would you agree or would you disagree?
I agree 100%, and I will add an and. So the key is, and I think this is the critical piece, I live and breathe in frameworks. So I always look at different frameworks for different uses. And this is what I love about AI. If you give it a framework, it will hold you to that framework every time. So one of the things I do is I build custom GPTs in the Chat GPT ecosystem. I also use Gemini. I use their gems. But the secret is you need to know what success looks like so that you can judge the quality of the output you're getting. And this is the fundamental, I'm sorry, but a lot of people use AI like children. They go in and they treat it like a vending machine. They throw something in and say, what do you think? And they take the first answer, they copy paste and run with it. What I like to do is have a detailed discussion. And so what I'll do, depending on what I'm working on, I'll pick my board of advisors. So, for example, if I'm doing marketing, I'm going to have a board of advisors and I'm going to skew it to people that resonate with me. So Chet Holmes, Dan Sullivan, Dan Kennedy. But basically, you want to have some judgment. As a human being, you need to tell AI what success looks like. So if your metric is likes, great. If your metrics is dollars in the bank, that's a very different metric. But once you do that, and I actually have different levels. So between us, I have about 430 custom GPTs that are specialists in one area. So I have one that is all it does is the specialist in marketing strategy. And I can throw something in there and say, is this strategic enough? And it'll give me a score and say, yeah, you're playing in tactics, buddy. So the key is you as the business owner, and I think this is the part that people are missing. People go straight to write me a viral post for LinkedIn. Well, there's several steps before viral posts that most people skip. And again, what's the goal of the post? Who is the post supposed to reach, etc. Because there's a very different approach to viral post versus viral approach helping entrepreneurs understand AI. So again, if you're stuck in tactics, you're going to get really tactical results. And I'm not kidding. One of my clients said, Jeff, I just need something to do. I literally went into ChatGPT and said, here's our strategy. My client's desperate for something to do. Give me 100 busy work items. And I'm not kidding. I gave him the list and he's like, oh, thank God I got something to do. And I'm like, okay, you go play and waste your time. I'm going to stay here in the strategy. And surprise, surprise, when I finally finished the strategy for him, it was a miracle that some of the busy work actually contributed. But it also required a major course correction from the busy work. So I believe a lot of people, if they know how to use AI properly, and I'll step back to tell you what I mean by that. If they know how to use AI properly, they can use AI to hold them accountable. But between you and me, most people want the endorphins and the dopamine hit of completed, not the pain of accountability. Because accountability also means sometimes you're told you're not doing it right. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I kind of got a sense as you were describing that if I was to bring this advisor, this GPT, or maybe a team of them within one prompt or one project, to use ChatGPT kind of phraseology there, if I was to bring that to a meeting, if it's a meeting with myself or with a team, then I would potentially be able to prompt it to do the thing that most actual humans don't do, which is be super honest. Because what you'll find, I'm sure you've seen this totally sort of across your career as well, Jeff, is that a lot of people like to say yes. Yes is the easiest thing to say. Yes, that's a great strategy, Neil. Yes, you've done a good job there, Neil. Whereas actually what they wanted to say was but actually I don't think this bit's going to work. Now, GPT, if you ask it to be super honest on a 100% rating, it will tell you if it really doesn't think it's going to work. Whereas you're not really going to get honesty necessarily from everybody you ask, because it's easier to say yes and then you can just go on with your own stuff. Or if you're in a certain culture in an organization, the management possibly don't want to hear or don't want to be challenged, because it's like, well, how dare you challenge us? We're the management. Whereas AI is going to, if you want it to, is going to go beyond the, oh, you're just amazing, Jeff. That's what the most amazing strategic idea, which is the default setting, of course, isn't it?
Yeah.
So would you advocate this real kind of honesty plug or this honesty prompting? Because it feels that that is a real kind of leap forward over using humans for critiquing stuff.
Well, and so I'm going to share a couple things, and I truly advocate for using AI. First, the caveat, the Chat GPT, and by the way, most of the other platforms are like this. They're designed to maximize our time on there. So they do that by giving us little dopamine hits saying, yes, you're smart, yes, you're smart, yes, you're smart. Now, when I use ChatGPT for something that's mission critical, I am autistic. And one of my gifts being autistic is I am blunt. Like I am talking about, I will rip the skin off your soul. I will have you crying, not on purpose, not being mean, but because my brain literally processes, if I'm going to help you, I can give you the truth. If I lie to you, I'm going to send you off on a tangent. So what I've done is I actually have a custom GPT that I've trained, and its identity file says it's autistic, and it will give you a very blunt answer. And I realized that I've spent most of my life learning how to unblunt my answers because people don't want the truth most of the time. But now I have a scale. So there's mode 0, which is complete autistic blunt, I will make you cry, all the way up to a mode 10, which is sugarcoat it, but kick me in the butt when I need it. I personally always operate at mode 0 because I don't want fluff and nonsense. And honestly, I think most people should be able to, I believe that iron sharpens iron. So if I program my AI to challenge me, I am not going to have that instant gratification dopamine hit. However, I also know that my plan is going to work because it's been battle tested, pre-tested before going into battle. I want to know the weaknesses. Again, back to Sun Tzu, if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you need not fear the outcome of 100 battles. And honestly, I think a lot of people put the blinders on and they're just hoping for the best. I want to know if something's flawed before I launch it. I don't want it to explode on the, in the air. I want it to explode or not explode, but, see the flaws in the lab. But honestly, I think a lot of people want the instant gratification. And again, ChatGPT is really good at that by default. People are suing because it said, but you told me I was smart and I quit my job and now I can't find another job. And it's like, grain of salt, people. You are still the adult in the room. You got to use your common sense. Now, another weird thing that I obsess over in the psychology field, the human brain has over 180 biases, cognitive biases that we are blind to because they're biases. I actually have different models that look for blind spots that I'm completely oblivious to. And I want to see those blind spots before I, launch the big product and go, ooh, I didn't see that coming.
It's really, really interesting. I mean, do you feel that kind of honesty then, if you get to a point in the relationship that you have, not necessarily, I'm talking rhetorically here, but that one has with their AI, and let's just assume that they're going deep with a particular AI platform, and anyone you can choose here. We're not exclusively GPT, but let's just say that it is GPT. So you're going kind of deeper and deeper into the relationship. You get to a certain point where, yes, those dopamine fixes just literally aren't enough and you want the honesty. It feels like it is a proper let's just say, human to human relationship kind of building here? Because, with a partner, for example, a life partner, you were at some point in that relationship treading carefully, sussing each other out. It wasn't that complete, I'm now your soulmate, I can reveal everything, my darkest secrets. It wasn't that at the beginning. So do you feel for a lot of us, we're actually going through that kind of psychological bonding with AI, and you get to a certain point where you feel, actually, we know each other, okay, we'll use this word, but we know each other well enough now for me to say, look, just don't sugarcoat it. Give everything now to me honestly. And when you get to that point, you can then use the uppercase R in the word relationship. But prior to that, it has to be lowercase r, because really it's a prompting and an output kind of scenario. Is this the barometer, do you think?
Well, I'm going to say yes, and I think the reality is, if I may, it's first about our relationship with ourselves. And this is honestly, believe it or not, as a business, as an entrepreneur, I do a lot of breath work, I do a lot of meditation, because my biases come from things I'm not willing to face or I'm not ready for. I believe that we need to work on ourselves. And as we get clearer and clearer on who we are, then we get clearer and clearer on how our relationships, and I use that word loosely, how those relationships serve us. And the next phase in that is, once we're clear on what matters to us, then we can get clear. And I like to tell people that ChatGPT, or AI in general, it's just a tool, but it's our relationship with that tool that matters. And believe it or not, I think a lot of people come in adversarial and they want to butt heads with the model and they fight with it. Again, there's scarcity in that world, but I've learned to use it. It's become like a second brain to me. And I don't want anybody to lock me up. I'm not crazy. I recognize that it's a calculating engine, but it's as much a part of me as my glasses. Take my glasses off, I can't see straight. Put down AI, I can still think straight, but AI enhances the ideas that I have. And I think that's where we're going to see the big divide, is the experts that use AI to refine their thoughts and their beliefs are going to emerge very victorious. Whereas the people who say, ChatGPT, do my homework for me, I don't want to think, they're going to drop off, because number one, they're not challenging themselves, but number two, they're not challenging AI. So I see it almost, it's literally interchangeable if we use AI well. And by the way, there's a lot of studies saying, AI is making people dumber. No, the reality is AI is making dumb people louder, which means we hear the dumbness. But the reality is, good AI in the hands of a sharp mind, one who knows themselves, knows their strengths, weaknesses. It's the difference between cutting wood with an old axe versus using a laser. So I think we're going to see that relationship. And I do use the word relationship. It is a tool, but it's a tool that we can use to enhance ourselves, and that can be used to enhance the things we do, if we know what we do in the first place.
So there's this kind of, I'm trying to get a sense of whether you're feeling hopeful and positive over the coming years, because we're going to see this, I guess, play out in one way or another. And my prediction would be it is very much in the way that you're talking here. But whichever way it goes, are you kind of feeling hopeful about this? Because it feels like it could be quite polarizing for not just business world, but society in general, those who do and have, and those who chose not to or who ignored. It kind of, there's this going to, is this going to backfire, or are you feeling like everyone's going to figure this out for their own purposes and it'll all be good?
I have a three-part prediction that annoys people, but I'm an eternal optimist. So first and foremost, I will say, I believe we're at this unprecedented moment of leverage where we can transition how we think, how we work, how we exist. And I believe that over time, humanity will be better. So that's my top prediction. My nearer term prediction is that there's going to be a large group of the society that doesn't see the changes coming, and they're going to feel a lot of pain. It's kind of like the Industrial Revolution, where people destroyed machines because the machines were taking their jobs. And then the third thing is there's going to be this wave. I'm going to call it the trust deficit. I think we're going to go through this phase where we lose trust with digital stuff in general. And then at some point, we're going to reset to a time when we all trusted certain things. And then that's when we're going to build the next civilization. And I say all of that because I heard Elon Musk speak, and he sort of in one sentence talks about, the minor detail of the pain and suffering. And then he goes forward to the utopia where nobody has to work for a living and we're all going to be creative. There's going to be blood in the streets till we get there. So I don't want to diminish the pain and suffering of, people who are getting laid off now, from thought leadership or knowledge worker jobs. Factory jobs are disappearing. But the key is, if we as humans go, change is inevitable. A friend of mine actually says, change is inevitable, but we'll spend our entire lives resisting change. If people learn that change is inevitable and they look to the future, we can bring that era of prosperity in without the doom and gloom and the chaos. But having said that, humans being humans, there's going to be people who are in denial right up to the day they get laid off. We need to be training, and I'm not kidding, but my boys have both been taught how to use AI, because one's in high school, one's in junior high. The jobs they're going to have don't exist yet. And I want them to build those jobs, not sit around and go, woe is me, there's no jobs.
And I think that is the point, isn't it, really? It is this idea of you can be proactive. You can ignore it, hope it's going to go away. But I think the collective opinion is, no, this is going to be evolving, and it is the future. So therefore, what version of that would you want as an individual? And that kind of point is about being curious, listening, keeping on top of stuff, exploring, experimenting, maybe doing some of the things that we've shared here in this conversation, but just kind of being awake to, there's an opportunity here, guys. You've got to really kind of, be ready and be interested, because some of it you want to say no to, and those will be the right answers, but some of it may well resonate. So be ready. So you've got a podcast, haven't you, Jeff? I want to connect people with you and your work, and help people to carry this kind of journey forward with you if they wish to. What's the podcast? What's it all about? Can you share?
Sure. So my podcast is called The Lighthouse Sessions. Thank you for asking. And basically what I do is I interview visionary entrepreneurs, and we're looking at how they see the world. And my hope is, through this, we're going to shine a light on the entrepreneurs that are out there. My goal is to help people see that path forward without, we need to cut through the hype, because that's the noise. But really, truly, it's if we as entrepreneurs, I have this theory, entrepreneurs are the greatest force for good on the planet. We're going to solve all of the big problems that governments and nonprofits can't. But we need to unite. We need to come together. So the show is actually about the people behind the ideas. And my idea is really simple. I bring all of my guests together in networking events so that we get to know each other. And it's amazing what happens when you put a bunch of entrepreneurs together.
Wonderful. It feels like the future. So AI is just a tool, but it can empower the human who wishes to use it. Interesting and fascinating stuff. Jeff Borschowa, thank you so much again for this conversation. It's always an absolute pleasure talking to you. I mean, there's so many little anecdotes and ideas that I've got always after a conversation with you. So I'm going to go away and explore and play with those. But really appreciate your time today.
Well, it was a pleasure, Neil. Thank you for having me.